Witam serdecznie.
Welcome, ladies and gentlemen. It's good that my presentation is going to take place after the previous one. From my observation, I mean, everybody is using the phone everywhere, etc. As part of my work with the students at Gdańsk University, and as part of the foundation that we established, we decided to cope with the problem of phonoholism, that is, addiction to smartphones or mobile phones. What we've proposed were different influences which formed a very interesting research element. We conducted a pilot study in Gdynia, the quantitative study. We checked the age of the children, what they use their phones for, etc., etc. More than 800 schools in Poland participated, and we studied 700 children, aged 12, 14, 17, sorry. But a lot is happening in between these statistics. So I was trying to look for something that would lead us to qualitative research. And I've decided that we should propose something really interesting for them. So I decided to find persons willing to participate in 72 hours offline. So that was the offline experiment. And that actually was the starting point for the qualitative interviews that we then conducted with 62 participants. And, well, they were after the detox, which really made a big impression on them. Well, this is also a reference to the first and the second presentations that were delivered. It was not a story about addicted children. It was a story about dysfunctional parents, to a large extent. So in this context, I'm putting forward a very strong thesis, which I included at the end of my presentation. Oh, well, I don't know whether I'll be able to find it. Well, never mind, I don't want to show you the whole presentation before I discuss it. The user who is addicted to digital media is the person who is not useful in interpersonal relationships. So if we're talking about phonoholism or addiction to telephone, sooner or later this leads us to what's happening at home. If we want to change the situation at school without support of parents, well, honestly speaking, our influence will be definitely smaller. Now, going back to the beginning of the presentation. Before I come to the experiment, let me discuss some facts in the context of what the first speaker said about the perception of harmfulness. Behavioral addictions are perceived as definitely less dangerous than addictions to different substances. And this is the perception of parents, teachers, and children themselves. Because for many years, the state has mainly focused on prevention of addiction to different substances. 80% of such programs deal with alcohol, drugs, and similar substances. I mean, the negative effects are also treated differently. and the attitude towards such effects is very important. 8% of the children take a selfie several dozen times a day. Well, nice, these are nice pictures, but 58 people died last year globally when making a selfie.
Okay, so it's fair to say, to build the whole narration in the context of selfie, you know, telling why, what for, but I'm sure that there are people who, before eating a great meal in a restaurant, are going to take several snaps with that food by the table and publish it online. Okay, I'm picking the stuff that fits my presentation. So selfie is one thing, but we know that most of them are published online. So it's a matter of safety and security. Well, very often you take selfie from the top side, from the aerial view. So you see the décolletage, you see your body. So you're exposing yourself to cyber violence or cybercrime. Children and youth use and have in their computers many things that they shouldn't be really seen by other people, and you have to keep it in mind as parents or future parents or just internet users. And we probably know it because we use the internet. Well, children aged 12, 17, every 10th person approximately are taking intimate snaps and share them with other users. And they use more sexters. They don't admit it. You know, admitting to taking such snaps and receiving them are two different things. Well, making immoral proposals via internet. Okay, and we are slowly approaching the experiment. Back then the experiment wasn't there because, first of all, we've conducted research which was a springboard for us to discuss certain things with parents. But as it perspires, today in Polish households, parents limit their educational role, if that could be called educational role at all, to purchase of a cell phone and paying the subscription. So the red light should go off now, because this is how I'm a parent myself, so I'm talking about my role, about talking to our children about the use of mobile devices. And of course, this translates into different principles. Children argue that in 60% of cases, there are no rules at home, rules applicable to the use of mobile phones. Another thing. Okay, school, it's the leitmotif. Today in Poland there is a huge debate about what to do with cell phones at home. Should we ban them or not? As a foundation and a parent, I'm probably the last parent or institution who believes that very rigorous provisions banning mobile devices from school are a good idea. It's not a good idea. We've surveyed 20,000 children and 20% are seriously addicted. And such people, don't make focused students, and probably when they drop out, they'll be so hooked on internet that you can forget about their follow-up education. On average in Poland, okay, listen to me, this is not representative research. Our project was open for all schools and more than 700 have applied for it, but there are several empty blank spaces in Poland, places we have not reached. There's going to be second flight of research, but it's fair to say that an average child aged 10 starts to use his or her phone. In case of large cities, the age is lower, it's 7 or 8 years of age. First communion. Okay, so this is how it looks like. It's been said before that family conflicts are sometimes spurred by compulsive use of cell phones, but it's also an important finding which came out in the experiment. So 3 days being away, being unplugged is not a lot, because very often parents punish their children by taking internet and phone away for several days, or they reward children, you know, you've got good grades so you can spend more time in front of your computer. You know, it's like shooting yourself in the foot. You are conditioning your children by introducing penalties and rewards which are meaningless because they don't stand for anything really. Besides, okay, I'll tell you about it later. Okay, so you have notorious situations where a child is sitting together with his or her parents in the same room and communicates with them via social media or phone. Well, Maciej, you know, take the rubbish out. Well, it takes out, you know, that it's better to text your child or to write it on social media than to call the child and say, you know, please take the rubbish out. Okay, let's leave it for now. Okay, between 14th and 20th of March, in Gdynia, we staged an experiment called Unplugged. Because we were seeking, and we did find more than 100 volunteers willing to get out from the virtual reality for 3 days. First of all, when we announced it online, we had no applications for the first 3 weeks. We thought that perhaps we should, you know, introduce more lenient conditions, you know, to attract people. But later, the educational faculty in Gdynia offered us a helping hand, and all in all, we had 130 volunteers at the beginning. But we've told them honestly what are the rules. Okay, so they were cut off from their smartphones, television, PCs, tablets, online gaming. So when we told them what they won't be using, 30 people left the room, and then gradually, you know, they were leaving. We were left with 100, and then, well, between 14th and the 20th of March, they had to find 3 days. They didn't conduct the experiment at the same time. Some of them chose the weekend, some of them opted for weekdays. So there were very interesting preparation strategies, by the way. You know, some of them were compulsively using, you know, the computers, the gaming, for example, because it's going to be over soon. Most of them thought, you know, let's be done with it quickly, and they embarked on the experiment straight away. And some individuals said that they left those last 3 days, but they were gradually gearing for it by reducing gradually time spent online. Great attitude. So we asked them to keep a diary, and, you know, it came up in the concept of our program. It's a good thing. But there is one important finding. I don't know what we can do about it within our program. This detox is not suitable for primary schools. Well, we provided our support. I mean, our experiment covered 6th graders and 2nd class junior high students. But Gdynia is a large city. It's a city, and young people did not really get committed to the experiment. So I can only say that results were rather flat. Reading diaries, you know, it turned out that these days were uneventful, but I'm sorry we didn't hire graphologists, because, you know, the writing did change over the course of days. So first of all, without the telephone to internet, you know, try to get to the city center of Gdynia and meet your friend for a coffee. So this is what we asked them to do. They had to check, you know, the bus schedule. at the bus stop. So, you know, whole new strategies they had to resort to. They didn't know how to wake up without the phone. Most of us today, not only children, also adults, we just take the phone to our bed. There is the alarm clock. You set, you know, 16 different times every 5 minutes until you wake up. And, you know, they kept on calling me before the experiment started, asking, how will I wake up? Buy yourself an alarm clock, I said. What is it? They said. And later in their diaries, perhaps it's the same girl who called me asking about the alarm clock, you know, she wrote, I borrowed an alarm clock from my grandma. I didn't know that there are things like that before. So people were late, they didn't come on time, they struggled with, you know, every functioning in daily life. Okay, second task, talk to your grandmother about the good old days. So the children did hear a lot about it. And third task, which came out naturally, perhaps it should be rescheduled in another flight. Create together with your friends or class an exciting poster about phone addiction, and later we wanted to stage a competition for the best one. Okay, why did we do it? Well, we followed up on quantitative research because, to be honest, there were some attempts made in the past, but these were usually studies, usually, you know, motivational corporate excursions in the desert, but, you know, phones were not taken away from people. But we made a deal. We did agree with children. I'm not sure whether they had, for example, a smartphone stashed under the pillow, but most of children who took part in the experiment handed over their phones to parents. So we did it to show others that you can do it, to think together how you can creatively spend your time. Well, as a result of our experiment, it turned out that we've got plenty of time. Well, we also wanted to formulate tips and guidance for people who want to spend their free time not in using new technologies, who want to live without them, and for people who want to check out if they can cope without new communication tools. So we've inquired, why do you want to take part in the experiment? So, you know, most people were confrontation oriented. They wanted to check if they are going to cope. And parents said, yes, we were inciting our children, saying, you can't do it, you can't do it. And the response was, I can't do it, you know, I'll show you that I can. So that's how children volunteered for the program. And they also wanted to see how is life without new technologies. You know, it was an outlandish experience for most of them. I know that we are advocating responsible use of digital media. I know that those media are beneficial for the digital community, but we need to use them consciously to maximize our benefits and mitigate the risks. We are talking about addiction today, but we are compromising our relationships. Okay, we also wanted to check how important it is to use new communication tools, to identify ways and formats of using new technologies, to find out how it is to spend time without new media. And we've done it. We've succeeded. Well, there were isolated cases. You know, people did drop out from our experiment. You know, they were experiencing different emotions. We did observe, I know that this is a very short time in Poland, but in South Korea we would probably, I mean, China were interested in the experiment, but they said that you've got everything you wish for in your phone, healthcare, access to public toilets, so you can't take those things away from people, right? You would have to ask top authorities of the state to do that. Okay, so the experiment, like I've said, did not only embrace young people, it covered the whole family. So the experiment was completed by most volunteers, and one of the findings is you can live without your phone, but what for? Why bother? Okay, so it turned out that we had so much of free time if we were not connected. If you are thinking about limiting in an authoritarian way, our volunteers did agree to it, but if you want to curb access to digital media while giving no alternative, I think it's a hard nut to crack for a person you know, who's 6 months old and busy with the tablet. And it turned out that parents we've investigated did not cope with managing their free time. So it's fair to say and ask, what parents in Poland nowadays are competent to organize and manage quality time with their children? How creative are we? Is there any state support? Are we resorting to resources of local communities, of local municipalities? And another very important thing we need to answer and consider. Okay, the first evening was the worst. And children wrote. When we are at school, you can talk to someone, but when you come back home and it's 7 or 8 p.m., you have no one to talk to, and it's the pits. That's when people go online, normally. Unfortunately, there were some comments which were not rare, rather frequent, I would say, that children felt lonely at home. And, you know, coming back to the quote that, you know, evenings are the worst, they also wrote, despite the fact that parents were in the room next door, they felt lonely and isolated. So there was some stress, there was frustration, because, you know, you would, you know, instinctively react, you know, to the ring sound, but then you would think, I've got no phone. But you can cope with it every day. Okay, I wouldn't call it aggression or amok, but we did have one unexpected situation, a girl on whom the experiment was very harsh. Because, you know, she was treated as a bizarre creature at school, but she had a very conscious mother, so she was on the safe side. You know, about programs that you are conducting, if you want to run such experiment, you should have a counselor or a therapist at hand. You should keep it in mind. It's important. Okay, I didn't realize I'm that addicted, says the mother in the interview. The experiment has shown that unexpectedly the new media have captured the imagination of 30-something-olds. Recently I've realized that it's been 18 years since I've bought my first phone, so I'm an adult user of adult devices. But, you know, these were different phones. You know, you could play the snake, you know, 5-second snaps. You know, conversations were short. You know, I'll be over in a minute, I'll call back. Okay, we are laughing, but I'm thinking, when you have a child and when you want to give it the first phone, don't buy the smartphone. You know, I just wish some company comes up with this wonderful gadget, my first phone. And it's just a phone. Stress parents go through because suddenly children don't have a phone with them and you can't talk to them. You know, this is something that was coming up, but I would dare to claim, perhaps I'll be lynched for that, but, you know, I dare to say that parents themselves very often force children to be online. They want children to be connected. Many mothers told me after the experiment, well, you know, it's 9 p.m. and I want my child to have his phone with him. Children admit that I would rather use the phone less frequently, but I have to because my mother keeps on calling or texting me. So, parents were visibly stressed. In interviews, it turned out that sooner or later... how many minutes have I got? 5. Oh, God.
Well, finally, I had some time to discuss feminine matters. We don't realize how much our children need contact from us. Contact, direct contact, hugging, saying that I love you. I mean, this is what kids are missing, and this is what they wrote in the journals. I don't know what to do with this, but we've analyzed 60 journals, and fathers were not mentioned at all. Well, ladies and gentlemen, this is not funny. The father, daddy, is not mentioned at all. Well, it's somewhere probably. I mean, I don't think that he's just watching a football game all the time with a beer in his hand, but still, something to think over. One of the mothers said, well, I asked one of the mothers what participating in the experiment gave to her. And she said, well, I hugged my child more frequently. So, how more frequently? Well, I started to hug him. And how old is your child? 15. So you don't hug normally? No, we don't. So children, and this is also important in this experiment, started looking for their parents. Frequently, I mean, there have been situations where children said in the interview that they wanted to spend a night with their mother in bed. Well, we didn't ask additional questions, but the question would be, why? Was it like it's better to hug your mom or be close but without telephone? Or was there something else involved? Finally, I had time to clean my room. Well, you know what? Because of this experiment, I got enough sleep. The children said many times that continuous contact with the media tires them. If somebody feels like throwing your phone away, not picking up the phone, this may lead to aggression. I finally need peace and quiet. If you have these reactions, then think about it. Maybe this is the time for the detox. Well, since our time is limited, let me just say that the results are going to be published on the 30th of September. Well, and it's going to be available on the website of our foundation. Now, briefly, a simplified way, a very simple way. Can you see it or read it? You can work on those habits in a very simple way. When we collected the data from 22,000 students, we also talked to teachers. We've prepared an expert opinion for the Supreme Chamber of Control, etc. The first picture, which is a very strong tool in the hands of parents and teachers, I need you to hug me. Tell me you love me, tell me I'm important. Spend time with me. Children want to have limits set for them. So I need to know the clear rules. How to use the phone, for example. Sit down with me and let's discuss the rules. Check what I'm using the phone for. Don't let me take my telephone to bed with me. Buy me a traditional alarm clock. During the dinner, let's put the phones away. Well, we've prepared 24 rules like that. Based on that, we are now working on different types of materials, educational materials. Well, to sum up, what do we need? Recognition of the problem at the local government and central government level, that e-addiction is a social problem. If this is recognized, if everybody agrees as to this being a social problem, then tools will be created in form of parliamentary acts, other regulations, etc. I encourage municipalities to work on programs regarding such addictions. This may be under the heading of addictions from substances. A person addicted to media is the person whose well-being is practically non-existent. An addicted employee in a corporation is an ineffective employee, not performing well. An addicted child does not absorb knowledge. Secondly, big support for parents. Thirdly, organization of school prevention programs. This should be developed, some recommendations should be sought, but it's necessary to develop such programs. Fourthly, organize your own detoxes. Definitely you should do this. Fifth, we're thinking about summer offline camps. Asia, Europe, US, if we're talking about solving the e-addiction problems, focus on organization of offline camps, or there are special centers, detox centers. Well, thank you. A lot of ideas. Time is limited. Well, more thing actually. Professor Maciej Dębski has been mentioned here. He's going to come to Gdynia on the 3rd of December. On the 1st, 2nd, and 3rd of December, we are organizing the conference Mobility in the Network. That the first day is going to concern relationships, then security and development, and we are going to invite Maciej Dębski. Well, we are available on the Facebook, because how can you exist without that? We can provide you the materials, and thank you very much for your attention.